I'm pleased to hand you over to Jan-Willem Middelberg, who's the author of the Big Data Framework and the related guidance materials. This is the latest level in the Enterprise Big Data framework that we're releasing. So I'll hand you over to Jan-Willem to introduce himself a little bit further. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, as always, for the kind introduction, Estelle, and thanks again for inviting me to host a webinar session today. I'm very pleased today that I can give a bit of an in-depth overview of the Big Data Analyst level, which was launched last year and has just made available the vanilla slide materials as well as the labs. So today's session is especially going to be interesting and targeted to trainers within the Apmg community and people who are interested in figuring out whether they would like to become an EBDA trainer as well. The reason that we've hosted today's session is to really make sure that you get a bit of a more in-depth overview of what can you expect within the Enterprise Big Data Analyst level. And also we're going to be covering some teaching techniques. So specifically, we're going to look at how you can utilize the online labs in order to showcase how big data and data science can be done within a classroom course. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So for the people who don't know me, I think most of the names on the screen are very familiar, but my name is Jan-Willem Middelberg. I'm one of the co-authors of the Enterprise Big Data Framework. If you want to connect with me after the session today, all my contact details are on the left, so you can always send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. Once again, what we're trying to achieve with the Enterprise Big Data Framework is to make sure that we provide this body of knowledge for enterprise big data and the modern enterprise. And ever since the launch, the whole ecosystem has been growing very rapidly. And one of the key reasons for that is that we're focusing a lot on vendor independent training within the community. So I'll explain that in a little bit more in detail. As Estelle has mentioned during the introductions, this session will be recorded and you're going to receive a link with the recording. And I also highly encourage you to ask all kinds of questions that you might have from a teaching perspective. So today is going to be a very small session. We only have like a dozen of people who are in the course today because all of them are obviously within the training domain. So if you have any questions or you would like to see a more in-depth overview of any of the topics that I'm covering, just feel free to let me know at any time. And Estelle, as we will progress, will moderate some of those questions. So also Estelle, if you feel that you would like to answer or ask a question from one of the participants in between, just feel free to barge in right away.
Thank you, Jan-Willem.
Yeah, so let's make it as interactive as possible because I know everybody's behind screens these days. So all kinds of questions would be greatly appreciated. So yeah, you can type them into the question box. You can also use the chat functionality, whatever you prefer, and we will try to moderate them as quickly as possible. So for today, I have prepared a short little agenda, and basically we're going to cover 4 main objectives or things that you should get out of this session today. First of all, I will provide you with a bit of an overview of the structure of the Enterprise Big Data Analyst level, which is the second level within the Enterprise Big Data Framework. And as you might have seen when you registered for this session, it is a way more in-depth level. So it's a more in-depth examination. It's a slightly tougher examination as well, but it's structured around the whole life cycle of analyzing data. So first, we're going to start with giving you a bit of an overview of the structure and why some of those design choices have been made. Then we're going to look at particular topics in detail, and we're going to look at the level of depth at which the EBDA course is discussed. And in this level, we will particularly do that based on the algorithms that students would need to know, as well as the way that they can apply that within a technology setting. So in order to illustrate that online setting, in the third part of this session, I'm going to make you familiar with the way that the online labs, which have just been launched last month, can be set up for all of the students within your classroom. And it's very important to know that you as an instructor are able to utilize these labs in order to guide all of the students throughout the different segments and sessions within the course. So this is really a new feature that we launched together with the vanilla materials last month. So that was also the reason that we prompted to set up this trainer briefing session, because it's really good to have an overview today, and also then in order to prepare for any class that you might give in the future, to get familiar with the way that the labs are organized. And then towards the end of the session, obviously I will explain a little bit on what are the requirements to become an accredited EBDA trainer and what you should do as potential next steps in order to prepare yourself to take the analyst exam. So that's a little bit of the topics that we're going to cover today. So I've structured this as a webinar into 3 main segments. I'll first go into a little bit of the structure of the analyst level itself. Then we'll see the labs, and then towards the end, we'll dive into the trainer requirements for the EBDA level. So let's get started with a little bit of a recap of the Enterprise Big Data Framework and why it was all developed, and why this trainer briefing, or why this Enterprise Big Data Analyst level has just been launched. So what we've noticed since 2019, when we launched the Enterprise Big Data Framework, is that the community of people who have either been certified and who are training within Enterprise Big Data has rapidly been growing. To date, we have 26 Apmg accredited providers all over the world. Then we have 4 others which are currently undergoing application. So we'll hit 30 very, very quickly. And across those ATOs, we have around 50 certified trainers at this stage, who all represent knowledge in their respective domains and in their specific areas. At this stage, our ATO community is primarily located within Europe and Asia Pacific, and we're also actively recruiting partners for the North and South American regions. Ever since the framework was launched, we are trying to get trusted and knowledgeable partners in different parts of the world who could represent EBDA in that particular region, and who are who wish to make sure that they become a thought leader within that particular domain. Last year in May, at the highlight of the pandemic, I should say, we launched the Enterprise Big Data Analyst level. And this is really the 2nd level course, which is a more practical and hands-on course in which participants will learn really fundamental data analysis techniques. And the way that we're teaching that is to showcase how you can use algorithms that are commonly used in big data and data science on a day-to-day basis. The feedback that we received from the first couple of courses that were executed between May and September is that a lot of teachers were struggling with the fact on how they could teach this within the classroom, because participants needed to install software on their laptops, and in many corporate environments this was locked, and that led to delays in classroom ability to teach. So from September onwards, we have worked in order to resolve this specific element. And last month, we came out with a version 2 of the vanilla materials. And these now also include practical and, more importantly, browser-based labs. What do I mean with browser-based? Well, all of the students could complete the entire classroom as well as the teaching materials just with a regular browser. So whether you're using Edge or Chrome or Firefox, doesn't really matter. You can do all of the exercises not directly on your system, but within a cloud environment. And that's one of the major changes that we have launched last month, and also one of the major changes I'm very proud to showcase you a little bit more in detail today. So since we basically at this stage have more demands than we can carry, there's also this call for trainers that we've been actively promoting in the last couple of months. is we're really actively looking for trainers who are able to deliver on the demand that we currently have for the EBDA courses. So if you're interested after this course and you would like to know more, or you would like to start the process in order to make sure that you can do this, please reach out to me after the webinar or to Estelle so that we can guide you on this process. Towards the end of this session, I will also showcase how you can get started very quickly. So that's the key reason why we did the trainer briefing session today. So as a little bit of a recap for the people who might be new towards the Enterprise Big Data Framework, the reason that the framework is growing very, very rapidly and we have all of these different partners across the world is that with the Big Data Framework, we've chosen a really vendor-independent approach to data analysis and big data. So whereas you will see that most other data science and big data programs are targeted around specific technologies, like for instance, programming, or they are centered around a particular technology, for instance, Microsoft or Azure or Google Cloud kinds of courses. What we're actively trying to do with the Big Data Framework is keep it vendor neutral, making sure that it's completely independent of whatever technology stack you have in your own organization. The second key element that we focused on within the framework was really to focus on the people aspect. So the way that we've accomplished that is to make sure that all of the materials are available under a Creative Commons license. So that means that participants can download the course booklets as well as the exercises, as well as the primary guidance booklets, all from the website. And this is done with a tremendous pace. So on an average month, we have anywhere between 7,000 and 8,000 people who download the books and are able to learn more about big data. The reason that we want to do that is that we want to make sure that there's a great amount of community and people who would like to contribute towards the Big Data Framework. And it's also one of the reasons why I think it has been growing so rapidly in the last couple of years. However, in order to teach about the materials, you would need to go through the Apmg accreditation process. The reason that we've chosen to do this is to make sure that the quality of the trainers and the ecosystem remains intact. So even though people are able to read about the booklet, you still would require training, especially in the more advanced levels, in order to make sure that you could pass the examination. And I'll showcase a little bit of that in more detail today. So as a short recap, and if you have never seen this before, I also highly recommend to watch one of our previous webinars with Apmg that introduced the Enterprise Big Data Framework in more detail. But as a bit of a short recap, the Enterprise Big Data Framework consists of 6 major competencies that enterprise organizations would need to address in order to become successful in the analysis of big data and data science programs. So what we've targeted with this approach is to really start from all of the different components that are necessary. It starts with strategy and ends all the way with artificial intelligence. So we've deliberately chosen a competency model because it means that organizations can grow over time, they can become more proficient. So in order to analyze massive quantities of data, you obviously need to have a strategy in order to retrieve value. You need to think about your technical setup, so your architecture and how you can design that within your IT enterprise architecture. You need to have a good and sound knowledge about algorithms, which is going to be the primary focus also of today. You need to think about processes like cybersecurity, data privacy, especially in larger enterprises. This is a primary aspect to think about. Then you need to consider functions, which are the different people skills and the setup in which you're going to organize your data in the organization. And then the last component was artificial intelligence. So this is again a very, very high level overview of the Enterprise Big Data Framework. And unfortunately, because of time constraints, I don't have a lot more time to go into these topics in detail. But again, we've made previous webinars around that explain these topics in more detail. So go towards the Apmg YouTube channel and there will be overload of information that you can find on this particular topic. So the focus for today's session is going to be on the Enterprise Big Data Analyst. And as Estelle mentioned right in the introduction, this is the latest version of the course that has been launched. So we're currently in version number 2. And within this course, we're focusing specifically on analysis techniques. So what does it take in order to become a proficient enterprise big data analyst? One of the primary targets that we looked at is what is the job role and what is the job scope of a data analyst? And in the course, as well as in the exam, we'll go into quite a lot of depth. So it's not as a 1 or 2 day course with which you can very quickly sit it and then achieve the certification. What we've really tried to do is make an industry standard when it comes to data analysts in order what are the kind of skills that they are required to know in order to complete their job successfully. So for today's presentation, I'm going to be focusing primarily on that. I'm going to focus on what can you do in order to teach this EBDA level, and how can you deal with different questions that you might encounter within a classroom whilst teaching this course. So let's start all the way at the beginning and the fundamental basis of data analysis that we've taken as key input for this course. And one of the most fundamental aspects to understand about data analysis is coming from John Tukey, which is a very famous mathematician that is basically considered the founding father of data analysis. Because data analysis up until the early 1970s was basically just called statistics. It was a scientific domain and that looked at statistical techniques and was primarily practiced within the academic domain. And John Tukey was basically the first person to say, well, although I really like the field of statistics, I think that the whole world, and especially because of the quick rise of computers, is moving into a different direction. And he was really one of the first to call that data analysis. And on this slide, you see the way that he defined data analysis. And he defined it as the procedures for analyzing data and the techniques for interpreting the results of such procedures. So basically, he created a whole new field, and that's also still something that is as true today as it was in 1962 when he wrote those words. But at that time, it basically set aside the world of data analysis from the traditional field of statistics. So that was the basis of the process that we're following today. And this is the foundation of the course as we currently know it, because what we really did is that we focused in on, well, what are procedures for analyzing data and what are the techniques that you require in order to call yourself a certified data analyst. So that's really what we looked at. And basically, if we take these words in the more modern context of today, we could say that even though this was coming from 1962, the whole process of data analysis hasn't changed. However, what of course has changed in the last, especially 2 decades, is that the amount and the size and the volume of data has exploded. So what we've tried to do within this course is really bring the process-oriented structural aspects from data analysis towards the world of big data, so that in an enterprise organization, you can really start to extract value from your different data sources. And it's this process-oriented nature that is really the fundamental aspect of becoming a professional big data analyst. And as you can see here on a very high level on the slide, the analysis process basically consists of 5 major steps. So let's zoom into that in a little bit more detail. If you have seen the first couple of chapters of the Enterprise Big Data Analyst Guide, this picture might look pretty familiar, because at the top of this slide, you basically still see the 5 fundamental steps that data analysis runs through. And what we're going to do in the data analyst course is that we're going to zoom in in each of those 5 domains into more detail. So it's all starts on the left with defining business objectives, and it moves all the way towards the right, where the results of analysis need to be visualized into either reports or dashboards or whatever other way you would like to present your data. But before you get there, you basically move throughout what we refer to as the data pipeline. So you need to make sure that you have access to your data, you need to prepare it so it can be adequately analyzed by algorithms. And then the most crucial part, you need to build your models in order to retrieve the results. And we all need to do that on massive quantities of data. So typically it requires also some infrastructure challenges, and that's what we've covered in distributed storage and processing. So on a very high level, this is also like the table of contents of the data analyst course, because we will explore all of the topics that you see here on the slide into a lot of detail. And in my opinion, in order to call yourself a proficient big data analyst, you really need to have more in-depth knowledge about all of these topics, all the way from how do you get access to data, how do you clean it, how do you analyze it, what are different analysis techniques that you can use, and which algorithms should you use in which particular situation. So this is the central model of the data analyst course. So based upon that model, we have created, which is now available as the download, and that is the EBDA guide. The Enterprise Big Data Analyst Guide is the book that basically covers these 5 stages in a very much in-depth kind of way. And what we're subsequently doing within the classroom, and this is where it becomes important from a teaching point of view, is that we're not just going to explain the fundamental theory, we're also going to teach students how they can actually do that. And within the world of big data, there's basically 2 main languages in which you can teach students, and those are R and Python. So what we've done in the EBDA guide is that we've made examples available for both those languages in order to understand how you can apply algorithms into the real world. So this is also a major difference between the professional level and the analyst level. The analyst level, you're expected to actually execute these particular algorithms. You need to have an understanding of how they work, and you would need to practice with that. And that is also the reason that we've made the labs available right now for all of the accredited ATOs, so that you can start preparing these labs by yourself. Good. So what I will do out of these 5 key topics that we're moving through is I'll provide you with a very high-level introduction of what is primarily covered within each segment. And as we've just seen, after we've defined our business objectives, one of the major next areas of focus is going to be on data ingestion. So within this part of the course, what we're focusing on is where can you get data from? And how do you set it in such a format that it can be adequately analyzed? What we're actually doing within this part of the course is that we're creating what is known as a data lake, which is the centralized repository for organizations in which they combine all of their structured and unstructured data. Typically, this is the centralized repository on which you can start to run your analysis. So in the first part of the course, we're really going to explain how can you import different data sets from different sources? How can you deal with the different data structures, like for instance, pictures or images and relational or non-relational data? And how can you all combine that within a data lake? After that, in the course, we are moving towards the preparation of data, because in your data lake, you will typically have data sets that are not 100% valid, or they might have erroneous data, or they might have even mistakes within them. So this is a very fundamental aspect of big data and data analysis, because in order to actually run a particular algorithm, you will need to have knowledge about, well, what kind of format is in the data itself. And the New York Times very famously did a research study, and that showed that around 50 to 80% of data analysts spend their time on the cleaning and wrangling activities so that you can get your data within the right order. So this is the key thing that we're going to be covering within the second part of the course is how do you transform your data into a format that becomes readable? How do you structure it? How do you get rid of erroneous, duplicate, or even missing data? All of these techniques are going to be covered. And as a good data analyst, I think this is also a very fundamental part, because if you're not able to do that and not able to understand how you should transform your data in order to make it readable by algorithms, then the results will also contain mistakes. So it's a really fundamental part to consider. Within data preparation, we're basically going to cover two major topics. One is known as data cleaning, which you see on the left-hand side of the slide. On the other hand, you see data wrangling, which is basically transforming data into the desired output. So within the course, we're going to teach students on how they can clean and how they can wrangle their data in order to make sure that their data can be read by algorithms accordingly. And then we move towards the majority part, or I would say the largest component of the course, and that is the different analysis techniques. So in the majority part of the course, what we're going to do is that we're going to explain towards the students how they can analyze data, what are different data models or different techniques that exist. Remember back the words from John Tukey. And more importantly, within those techniques, which common algorithms exist that can help you in order to solve these problems. So here on this slide, you see some of the major domains that we're covering within the course. So we will discuss exploratory data analysis, or EBDA, regression, classification, outlier detection, and statistical inference. And more importantly, what we will do in this course is that we don't just cover the basics. This is basically something that has already been done within the professional course, which, as you might remember, is a prerequisite for this course. So in the analyst level, we actually go into quite a bit of depth. So what we will teach students is, for instance, within the technique of classification algorithms, we will explain to them what are the 4 most common classification algorithms and exactly how do they work from a theoretical point of view. And then we will showcase how they will work in practice. So the structure of the course is always a combination of a more theoretical approach, for instance, to explain what classification is, and then to subsequently explain how the k-nearest neighbor algorithm works. But then we are actually going to showcase that with a practical example. And students will also need to be able to utilize those practical examples within their online environments and within their labs. And this might seem harder than it sounds, because the beautiful thing about both languages, Python and R, is that all of these algorithms have already been pre-programmed within the environments, or there are packages available to do that. So we don't expect data analysts to start defining their own algorithms completely from scratch. The major difference between the data analyst course and the data scientist course, which will be launched later in this year, is that within the analyst level, the students will learn about existing algorithms. In the scientist level, we're going to challenge them to write their own. So that requires some more advanced knowledge. However, in the analyst level, the scope is just what are existing algorithms, how do they work, and how can you apply them for particular situations. And this is also what we're going to be testing in the examination. So for instance, when we describe a particular classification problem or a particular business problem, students would need to understand for that particular business problem, which would be the most suitable algorithm to solve it. And that's also really fundamental in order to showcase and teach your students. It's all about the knowledge in what particular situation do you use a particular algorithm. It's very clearly stated that the EBDA is not a programming course. So you need to understand how to apply it. But the most fundamental thing that we will be testing on the exam is, do you know which different algorithms exist and when do you apply which one in which particular situation? So that's also why I'm saying at the top of this slide that we really try to learn the students beyond basics, because you might be familiar if you're in this domain that there's a lot of very basic approaches that already exist, a lot of very good basic YouTube videos, but in order to really take that next step, in order to challenge analysts to really have the knowledge in order to analyze large data sets, they will need to know a little bit more. And that's exactly what we're going to be covering in this course. So if I can give a little bit of a summary slide, what we will do in this course is that we will showcase which particular algorithms, and we've seen some of the examples on the previous slide, are used in order to solve business problems. So every type of business objective and therefore business question is an indicator of which are particular algorithms or machine learning models that might be utilized in order to solve that. And in order to be an efficient and knowledgeable data analyst, you would need to know the differences between all of these different algorithms, because this is what you would be doing on a daily basis. You might get a question from your boss or a particular problem that you would need to resolve. So it's then up to the data analyst to take that question, translate it into something that a computer can understand, and also to build and select the adequate model in the meantime. So on this slide, and I know that this might seem a little bit overwhelming at first, you basically see all of the different topics that are going to be covered within the analyst course. So it's more of an in-depth discussion on how do you use these particular techniques in order to get the value from the data. So I hope that this gives a bit of a good overview of what you can expect and what are the different topics that are covered throughout the analyst course. Good. So as I mentioned before, this is obviously not something that you would be able to do within a 1 or a 2-day program. So we typically recommend that the EBDA course will be taught over a 5-day period of time. And that is typically for a more traditional classroom or full-day virtual learning. What we've been seeing with other customers and other training that we've provided in the last couple of months is that it's also a very useful format to either spread it out over an entire month, to just do a couple of days per week, or to spread it even out over a 2-week period of time and just do 3 to 4 hours a day. That's up to the ATO community in order what would be your best way forward, but I'm just explaining a couple of the things that have worked for us. So in the course, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to challenge students in order to find and apply these algorithms in more detail. So I've just taken a very short example today that is about unsupervised learning and clustering algorithms in this particular case. So what students will learn is what is clustering exactly, which particular clustering algorithms exist, and then also how to apply that. So it's always this 3-step approach. You learn something about the theory, you learn something about the underlying algorithms, and then you learn how to apply it in practice. So if we apply that towards clustering, which is basically looking for similarities between data points, what we will do in the course is that we will first explain what clustering is all about, and then we will look at the 2 most common clustering algorithms. In this case, this is hierarchical clustering and k-means clustering. And based upon those theoretical algorithms and the way to approach that, we will subsequently showcase how each algorithm will work in practice. So here you see an example from some of the labs on the right-hand side. So this is where we're using hierarchical clustering in order to make, in this case, 3 different distinctions between different data sets or different data points. So that's the whole process, and within the course that you will be teaching, you're basically going through these different examples together with the class so that they understand what is being expected and how they can do this all by themselves. And this is what I think is also really one of the fun parts, because this class is not just about theory, it's also helping your students to apply these things in practice. So here you see a slide from the vanilla materials, which I will cover a little bit later. And that first of all explains how clustering is, or how the algorithm works in a more visual component, so that students can see exactly what is happening when they talk about clustering and how the algorithm makes its particular decisions. And after we have covered the more theoretical aspect, then we will showcase how this is done in a real life situation. And this is also where I would like to switch and showcase all of you how the online labs work, because this has been introduced last month. It's a new development, and I'm pretty sure that all trainers are going to actually love this functionality, because it means no more installations on machines. It means no more problems that students might encounter. As long as you have a working browser and a working internet connection, you should be able to run all of the labs within your classrooms. So what I will do is I will quickly change my screen for a second. And I hope it is visible right now. Estelle, can you quickly confirm that for me?
What we can see is while you're away, your project went to sleep. Preparing project, it's waking up.
Yeah, it's good. So I've been talking for too long and then it goes to sleep. That's
we've got someone saying that they definitely want to sign up with this, Jan-Willem, so that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much for that feedback. We don't have any questions yet, but if anybody does want Jan-Willem to expand on anything or slow down, please do say in the chat. So and I think your screen is there now.
Visible?
Thank you very much. Yep,
great.
there.
Thanks so much. So what we've made available for all of the ATOs in order to teach the projects is these online browser-based labs. And the browser-based labs are very easy because they will provide a clean environment for every student every single time. So as soon as you open the link and give it towards all of your students, basically what students will do is that they will make a local copy of the materials that we've provided, and they can basically mess up their entire environment. It really doesn't matter because the source code remains the same. So this is how we can keep working on further improvements. It's how we can work further in order to make sure that the course develops over time. But while you're in the classroom, you don't need to worry about the fact that students will break anything, or if it's not working out, they can just download it or basically export a clean copy, and it will work again. And we have had some very positive feedback on this new development because it gets rid of installing all of the local versions. If you are on this webinar today and you already have been working with the course in the past and have been installing local applications, you know the exact problems that I'm talking about. So that means that we have also made available all of the data within the environment. And if you look at the screen right now, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, but if you look at the right bottom corner, you can. Okay, that's great. If you look in the right bottom corner, you basically also see all of the data sets that we will provide towards the students so that they have immediate access. So within these modules, I have just made labs number 1, 2, and 3 available for right now. You see all of the different labs that students will need to go through. And for instance, if you click on the lab, you will also find the data sets that the students would need in order to analyze it. And then within every lab, there is a very detailed instruction, which is this particular file. And with this file, you can basically run with them through a step-by-step basis. So in this lab, we're going to read in CSV files. We're going to teach people how to run Excel files or read in text files from a variety of different data sources. And you will also see that at the end of every lab, we have introduced a number of questions, and that is basically to test the knowledge of students. And as an instructor, and I'm pretty sure if you're teaching a lot, you're going to find this really useful. Basically, what you can do is you can make it into a separate HTML form, and that will showcase a localized version of how you can run it yourself. So for instance, suppose that you just want to run and import the elements that I've just showcased. The only thing that you would need to do as an instructor is that you need to click on the run button right here. You will see that it will become green and you will see the output and the actual methodology has run. So this is how you can showcase towards students how, in this case, for instance, they can read CSV files and then make that data available in the environment. So just to showcase how this works. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. We've got some questions coming in that are related to what you're doing now. So I think it might be easier if you pick those up as you go through, if that's okay, as opposed to at the end.
Absolutely.
Is that all right? So Dr. Sardi is saying, what ID did the participants need to access to the lab after the course to study? And what
so
if they want? Sorry.
Yeah, so basically, so let me answer that right away. So basically what they're doing is they're signing up for an account here on this cloud environment, and that is free of charge. So there's no, so they can access this for the rest of their lifetime.
Okay, that's great. And then what if they want access to actually use it on their own data or for their organization? I assume that covers the same.
Yeah, so basically the codes that you see right here is you can just copy paste that into your own projects and in your own local environments. And that's all because we've made everything available as an open source license. You can utilize everything in your own organization in whatever way you see fit. So there's no restrictions on that. It's just something that we've provided as part of the whole course experience.
Great, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem at all. What's also very useful, especially when you're teaching these elements, and this is something that you can provide towards all your students as well, is that you will see that every lab has also been automatically made available as a PDF document. So in case you would like to hand out instructions on how to do this, basically when you click this PDF file right here, you can see the exact instructions that people would need to follow in order to analyze it, and it will also showcase some of the results. And towards the end, there's also the end of module questions. So many ATOs choose to make these PDFs also available for instruction towards their students and to make those available as part of the course materials. Again, all of that is part of the license that you're getting when you're signing up with Apmg as an ATO, so you can use all of these course materials to your own benefit. So that's basically what the whole purpose of the online labs is looking like. So we've had some tremendous feedback about these labs for the classes that we've already done. Because it makes it so much more easier to teach it, because I've also been teaching this course a couple of times. I just put on this browser on a big screen. I will run with the students through all of the different sections, explain what is happening from a coding point of view, but you can also see that it's written out completely what you would need. And there's no longer any hassle or stress with where is the data stored, where's the data located, how can we import it into the environment, because all of the demo files, all of the data sets that you would need in order to finish the course and sit for the exam are all going to be provided within this right-hand side folder. So for every lab, there is a new folder available. So it's something that we've worked very hard on in the last couple of months to make this available, and it's now ready to be shared with the community. What you will also see, and this is because of the sake of time, I'm quickly also going to switch towards the vanilla materials, is that if you download the vanilla materials from Apmg, you will start to see that we've made references in the vanilla materials towards the labs. So here you see it on slide 21. This is a one-to-one match towards the lab that you would need to do at this moment in the classroom. So in the EBDA course, there's actually 12 labs, so approximately 2 to 3 per day. So it's a very hands-on course. And every time that you would need to start a new lab with your students, you can showcase the lab to them, and there's a reference towards it within the vanilla course materials itself. So there's actually quite a full package so that you can basically go up and running quite quickly in case you would like to teach this course as well. Good. For the sake of time, I'm just going to go back towards my main presentation because I only have a couple of minutes left, and I also did want to cover some of the next steps that you could take within the trainer community. So let me share the slides again. I think it's visible right now.
All
yes,
good.
it is. Good. So that's the new interactive labs, which have been made available since last month, and I think will greatly help you with getting all of your students up and running within the classroom quite quickly. Good. For the last 5 minutes, I have the last overview of what do you need to do if you find this interesting. And as Estelle mentioned, there's already some feedback within the comments. What do you need to do if you want to become a trainer? So very simple. The first step that you would need to take is pass the Enterprise Big Data Analyst exam yourself. Please note that it is a requirement that you pass at least 75 with a pass mark of at least 75%. And I see that for whatever reason there on this slide it shows the professional examination. This should have been the analyst examination. So it's a 2.5-hour exam. It consists of 80 questions, and you would need to get at least 65% correct. At this moment, we have the exam available in English, or in case you're interested in Chinese or Mandarin, if you prefer that as your primary language. As always, Apmg has done a tremendous amount of work to make all of the other supporting documents available. So there is accreditation documentation, there's live web pages, we have sample examinations, we have rationales, which you can see all of on the screen, and which are available to download in Huddle. So if you're already an existing ATO, you can go ahead and download the materials right after this webinar. In case you're not, you can always contact me or Estelle directly, and then we'll be happy to guide you through the whole process. So these are the course materials that have been made available. I've also referenced that ever since last month, there is this new slide deck available, which is also within the Huddle environment, and that explains all of the different structure of the course, and has also integrated the new labs that I've just showcased. I'm not going to, because of the sake of time, I'm not going to switch back again towards the vanilla slide materials, but you've just seen a quick overview of the entire deck that you would need in order to deliver the course. And as per the Apmg regulations, you feel free to change your logos and make sure that it becomes customized towards your own company so that you can utilize it accordingly. Good. One of the last key takeaways that I wanted to share with you today, and this is exclusively for the trainers who are on the call today, is that we've also made available a trainer self-study kit, which is basically a combination of all of the materials that you would need in order to prepare for the actual exam. So within that trainer kit, you're going to find all of the exercises. You're going to find a copy of all of the slide materials that you would need in the classroom, which is based on the vanilla materials. You'll find the syllabus included as well as the sample exam. So even if you're not accredited yet, you can at least start to make the preparations in order to become accredited. Please note that the materials that are in this self-study kit as a trainer have all been watermarked. So you cannot, it will very largely say that this is a trainer copy and is not intended for commercial distribution. So you won't be able to remove those watermarks. It's part of the self-study kit, and that's why we can make it available, because you cannot use this version and this material within the classroom. So if you're interested in receiving an access code towards the self-study kit, please let us know either by putting your name into the chat or send us an email afterwards, and we will make free copies of the self-study kit available to all of the trainers that are participating in this webinar today. So that's kind of a gift from us in order to, first of all, expand the market of trainers that are interested in becoming a trainer for EBDA. And second of all, as a reward for your time for joining in this webinar session today. So as Estelle knows, I always talk quite a bit on these webinar sessions, but I've managed to stay within the hour, so I'm already quite glad. I still have even some time for questions. So you see on the slide in front of you all of our contact information. If you want to reach out to me after this webinar or to Estelle, please feel free to do so. Estelle, I stayed within the time. Did we have some questions in the meantime?
And not so many questions. I think you've done a great job of covering everything, because it looks like people don't have questions, but a great deal of excitement and enthusiasm. I have forwarded some of those comments on to you, Jan-Willem. There's quite a few there, but we had the access questions which you covered. As I say, I think we now have 2 people saying that they are looking forward to training this, which is wonderful, which you'll see in the comments there. And pretty much everybody is saying, yes, please, I'd like that pack. So that's obviously hit the nail on the head. But excellent presentation as always, Jan-Willem. And I think it's important to say to people that are on the call, you are very approachable and accessible. And you know, if there are any questions, which there probably will be, you're very open to talking to people on a one-to-one basis, aren't you?
Absolutely. So if there's any additional questions that you might have, or you're struggling with getting accredited, because I know it's a bit of a process in the beginning, especially if you need to sit for the exams and have the higher scores. But I promise you it's worth it. And as soon as you're an accredited trainer and you deliver these sessions regularly, you will start to see that there's actually a very large demand for these training sessions. And that's also why we need the help, because the community can only grow if we have more trainers across the world who are enthusiastic and are willing to share their knowledge on these different topics. So please, if you are interested, reach out to either me or Estelle, and we'd be happy to support you further.
We have got one question just come through. I think people take a little while to warm up on the questions, but someone's saying, do you have a forum of use cases that have been accumulated that they could use?
So what we're trying to do within the labs is that we're using Enterprise Big Data use cases. So we've obviously anonymized those for the data sets that contain sensitive information, because we want to follow all the privacy laws and regulations, obviously, but a lot of the use cases are actually within the labs themselves. Other than that, on our website, we have a number of case studies available. There's also some white papers of companies that have been working with the Big Data Framework for a while. There's a number of expert interviews, which is also really a great resource and showcases a number of, I would basically say ambassadors that have used the Big Data Framework in the past and that share their experience. We have some very good ones from, for instance, Vodafone that are actually on the website, and you can look those up.
That's great. Good. And someone's got their trainer going through the process already, the Apmg accreditation process. I hope you're getting a good experience there, and they're saying that they have got a couple of clients lined up already, which is wonderful. So this is all
so there's actually good news for trainers that have already been accredited as as a big data trainer for the framework. So there's no required additional knowledge assessment. So if you're already an accredited EBDA or EBDP trainer, then the only thing that you would need to do is pass the exam with the elevated mark, and you can just apply for the extension of scope immediately without sitting through an additional knowledge interview.
Yeah, that's gone down well as well then, Jan-Willem. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we'll get this. Thank you very much, Jan-Willem, as always, for great information. Oh, sorry, one more just come in. In case we're asked to expand our materials as trainers, will the RStudio Cloud be open to exchange, store further examples? Good question.
So you can make modifications towards the labs, obviously, and you can also make your own copy and decide to share that towards your students. That's fine from our perspective, because the main idea is that you teach the required information. So you can also put in your own case studies. However, what we will do from the Enterprise Big Data Framework point of view is that we will make upgrades and updates only towards the version the version that we're sharing as the official version. So that would mean that you would need to keep track of whether changes have been made in the labs. But this is the only way that we could service the entire global community and have a single source of truth, if you want to call it, with regards to the labs. So feel free to create your own, feel free to make adjustments based on the labs that we've provided. But version control and next updates are only going to be done within the official environment.
Okay, that's it. So we will, how is version tracking handled?
So version tracking is handled with the versions control numbers that you will see at the start of the lab. So you might have seen it when I opened the labs, but there's basically a date that showcased the last time that was updated. We try to limit the number of updates to just twice a year, so to have like a formal release. But sometimes if there's just a typo or a mistake, we fix it quite quickly. And that means that basically from the moment that we fixed it, it's available for everyone. But if we're making large changes, then obviously you will receive an alert through Apmg that showcases a major release. And that's also why we're doing the webinar today. This is what we've considered a major release, and with the online labs and the new course materials. So that's why you've been informed about the session today.
That's great. The floodgates have opened now, Jan-Willem. So we've got. Do you have use cases for telco, oil and gas?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually a good telco case study within the Enterprise Big Data Analyst, which is about clustering algorithms. So here you get a data set of telco customers and their behavior online. So what kind of packages they've selected, and you're going to be challenged to convert that into different customer profiles so that you can subsequently target your marketing activities towards those clusters within your data. So telco example is already included within the course materials. We've also been doing a lot of these courses within the oil and gas industry, specifically with some of the multinational oil and gas companies in the world. So without naming any names, I'm pretty sure we can all imagine a couple of them. So within those case studies, we're specifically looking at things like classification of where is there a likeliness to find oil or something like that. So that's case studies that are covered. Obviously, what we're trying to do with the framework itself is make more case studies available as we will go along. And also that's a call out to our community. So if you have good case studies that you would like to share either on the website or to showcase your expertise, please always feel free to submit them.
Okay, and that brings us up to the hour, so we won't do any more questions. Somebody has asked how they feed back officially on anything that they've seen in the material that they want to question. So we will include those details in the follow-up. Thank you very much indeed.
I will showcase. So first of all, you can always send an email towards the address that you see on the screen, or that I've shared in the slides. That mailbox is obviously actively monitored, and if you have any additional feedback, we will probably start making a form so we can collect all feedback on the different labs as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jan-Willem. We'll follow up very, very shortly with everybody, but do feel free to reach out to myself or Jan-Willem at any point, and we will come back to you as soon as possible. Thanks so much for the great engagement, great presentation. Cheerio, everybody.
As always, a pleasure, Estelle. Thank you so much.